1942. Somewhere in the rolling English countryside, beyond hedgerows and quiet lanes, a group of British engineers gathered around a workbench. Spread across the table were rough, blackened shapes that looked like ordinary lumps of coal, nothing remarkable, nothing dangerous. Except they were neither ordinary nor harmless. Each one concealed a carefully engineered charge, a weapon designed to vanish into the machinery of the enemy and destroy it from within. These were not bombs meant to be planted under bridges or wired to tracks. They were intended for a subtler kind of warfare. German soldiers and railway workers would shovel them without a second thought into locomotive tenders and factory furnaces. Moments later, when the false coal reached the inferno of a firebox, it would detonate, rupturing a pressurized boiler and turning a powerful locomotive into twisted steel. There would be no warning, no visible sabotage, only another catastrophic accident. This was the work of Britain's Special Operations Executive, the SOE. And this deceptively simple invention, explosive coal, was part of a broader strategy to attack Nazi Germany where it was most vulnerable, without ever being seen. To understand why British intelligence invested time and talent into such a strange device, you have to understand how the German war machine actually moved. By 1941, Nazi Germany controlled vast territory, from the Atlantic coast of France deep into Eastern Europe. Armies, tanks, ammunition, fuel, food, nearly everything that sustained German power traveled by rail. The Reichsbahn and the captured railway systems of occupied Europe formed the arteries of conquest. Road transport was inefficient and devoured fuel Germany could barely afford. Railways, by contrast, ran on coal, and coal was everywhere. Mountains of it sat beside depots, factories, harbors, and engine sheds. This reliance created a hidden weakness. Rail lines could be repaired. Bridges, though vulnerable, were heavily guarded. But locomotives themselves were precious. Destroying one meant months of factory work to replace it. Traditional sabotage placed enormous risks on resistance fighters. Cutting rails or planting explosives demanded technical skill, precise timing, and a dangerous escape under constant patrols. Many paid with their lives. British planners wanted a different approach, something that required no training, no daring midnight raids. Something that could be introduced quietly, by anyone who could reach a coal pile. The answer was sabotage that didn't look like sabotage at all. The research behind this weapon took place in a network of discrete facilities scattered across southern England. One of the most important was Station 12, based at Aston House near Stevenage in Hertfordshire. Originally located close to Bletchley Park, the site had been moved in late 1940 after explosive tests became an unwelcome distraction to codebreakers working nearby. Under the command of Colonel Leslie Wood, Station 12 evolved into the SOE's primary weapons factory. The scale of production there was staggering. Over the course of the war, the station manufactured millions of time-delayed detonators and tens of thousands of limpet mines. But among all its devices, the most ingenious were those that hid their lethal purpose behind perfect ordinariness. Designing explosive coal was far more complicated than it appeared. The device had to be indistinguishable from real fuel. It needed to survive being tossed onto coal heaps, shoveled by hand, and transported in sacks or carts. At the same time, it had to function with absolute reliability once exposed to extreme heat. Detonate too early and the plot would be uncovered. Fail to detonate and the weapon was useless. British engineers settled on a compact charge of plastic explosive, around 1/4 of a pound, paired with a heat-sensitive ignition system. The explosive itself, known as Nobel 88, had been developed by Nobel Chemicals specifically for clandestine operations. It was moldable, stable, and powerful, with a faint almond-like odor that most users would never notice. When the fake coal entered a locomotive firebox, the intense heat ignited the fuse, triggering a detonator and then the main charge. On its own, that explosion was serious. But the real devastation came from the environment. Steam locomotives operated under immense pressure. Once the boiler was breached, the machine effectively destroyed itself in a violent cascade of tearing metal and escaping steam. Early production methods were crude but inventive. Engineers initially drilled cavities into real lumps of coal, filled them with explosive, and sealed the opening with a mixture of coal dust and adhesive. Arthur Christie, a laboratory assistant at Station 12, later recalled packing the charge into drilled coal using serrated tools. The approach worked, but it had a fatal flaw. Coal is brittle. Many lumps cracked or crumbled during drilling, making large-scale production unreliable. A breakthrough came from another SOE site, Station 15, located at a place known as the Thatched Barn in Borehamwood. This facility housed the camouflage section, led by Lieutenant Colonel Elder Wills, a former film art director who understood illusion better than most soldiers ever would. He recruited hundreds of craftsmen from Britain's film industry, set builders, prop makers, plaster specialists, people whose wartime contribution would be deception rather than spectacle. One of these recruits, Worley Bull, later famous for his work on 2001, A Space Odyssey, helped develop a new method. Instead of drilling real coal, the team molded the explosive into shapes that mimicked it. Using dyed plaster and binding materials, they created clamshell molds coated with genuine coal dust. The result looked authentic, but was far sturdier than hollowed-out coal. The final refinement eliminated visible seams altogether. Engineers encased the explosive charge in metal and poured liquid plaster around it, forming a seamless exterior. Once dusted with real coal particles, the device was indistinguishable from the real thing, even under close inspection. Different versions were produced to match local fuel supplies. Brown lignite, glossy black anthracite, and dull bituminous coal each had distinct appearances. SOE manufactured variants for each type, ensuring that explosive coal blended perfectly whether it was dropped in France, Norway, Poland, or the Balkans. By conservative estimates, SOE produced around 3.5 tons of explosive coal during the war. At roughly a quarter-pound per device, that suggests thousands of individual weapons. Distribution relied on RAF special duty squadrons flying from secret airfields such as RAF Tempsford. Squadrons 138 and 161 carried agents and supplies into occupied Europe in modified bombers, often at night and at low altitude. Between 1941 and 1945, these crews flew more than 13,000 sorties, delivering over 10,000 tons of equipment. France received the largest share, but shipments also reached Belgium, Norway, Poland, and Yugoslavia. Tito's partisans, engaged in relentless attacks on German supply lines, found the concept particularly useful in their campaign against rail transport. And yet, for all this effort, the historical record is strangely quiet. There are no clearly documented cases of a locomotive destroyed by explosive coal. No named operations, no precise dates, no after-action reports celebrating success. This absence is not an accident, it is the point. Explosive coal was designed to leave no trace of sabotage. A successful detonation would be indistinguishable from a boiler failure or maintenance error. German investigators arriving at a wrecked locomotive would find twisted steel and shattered components, but no obvious sign of an enemy hand. If the weapon worked, it erased itself from history. Adding to the silence, many SOE records were deliberately destroyed after the war, while others remain classified decades later. Railway sabotage was so widespread that attributing damage to one specific method became impossible. In France alone, resistance fighters carried out more than 1,800 locomotive attacks between mid-1943 and mid-1944, using everything from explosives to mechanical sabotage. What can be measured is the psychological effect. Once rumors spread that coal supplies might be contaminated, German authorities faced a dilemma with no good answer. Ignore the threat and accept sudden, catastrophic losses of locomotives, ships, and industrial machinery. Or guard coal depots everywhere, diverting thousands of troops from combat duties to watch piles of fuel. Neither option was sustainable. Locomotive crews grew nervous. Security demands ballooned. Rail service slowed under the weight of inspections and precautions. In some regions, assignment to railway security became so dangerous that it was used as a form of punishment. Germany understood the danger well enough to attempt the same tactic themselves. In 1942, Operation Pastorius sent German saboteurs to the United States carrying explosives disguised as coal. Their targets included power stations and rail infrastructure. The operation collapsed almost immediately. All the agents were captured before they could act. No further attempts followed. British double agent Eddie Chapman, known as Agent Zigzag, provided further insight into German efforts. In 1943, his handlers supplied him with coal bombs intended to sabotage a merchant ship. Chapman handed them over to British authorities instead. Analysis showed that German designs lagged behind British methods, still relying on drilled coal rather than seamless mold forms. Across the Atlantic, the concept did not go unnoticed. The American OSS developed its own version, codenamed Black Joe, using a different explosive compound. They even created camouflage kits allowing agents to tailor the appearance of explosive coal to local varieties. The idea had proven its worth, even if its successes remained invisible. The broader sabotage campaign against German railways achieved undeniable results. In the months leading up to D-Day, attacks reduced rail traffic in France by more than half, preventing rapid reinforcement of Normandy. In Yugoslavia, German commanders complained that maintaining rail security consumed enormous manpower, tying down forces desperately needed elsewhere. Whether explosive coal accounted for a large share of destroyed locomotives matters less than its contribution to fear and uncertainty. Railways are systems built on predictability. Explosive coal shattered that certainty. Every shovel of fuel became a potential threat. The legacy of this weapon extended far beyond the Second World War. So's innovations helped establish the doctrine of disguised explosives, devices hidden in everyday objects, designed to exploit routine. Later conflicts would see variations on the same idea, from concealed charges in industrial equipment to modern improvised explosive devices. Today, surviving examples of explosive coal can be found in museums. Test footage shot at SOE stations shows controlled detonations, silent and clinical. They are artifacts of a war fought not only with armies, but with imagination. In 1942, British engineers identified a problem others had overlooked. Germany depended on coal, and coal was trusted. By turning that trust into a weapon, they introduced doubt into every furnace and firebox across occupied Europe. Explosive coal did not announce its victories. It left no signatures, no trophies. Its success was measured in hesitation, in diverted resources, in the quiet fear that spread through the enemy's supply lines. It was sabotage at its most subtle, and a reminder that in war, the smallest deceptions can carry the greatest force.